Living in Virginia, you're in the fast lane on the information superhighway. We've invested $3 billion in Virginia's broadband network to give you one of the fastest internet connection speeds in the world, so you can build relationships, bring new business to our state, and meet the future of education. It's amazing what we can do together. Visit VCTA.com to learn how broadband connects the Commonwealth.
From the General Assembly and the City of Richmond, I'm Woody Evans for Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Cox Communications, connecting Virginians to their government. Welcome, Delegate Carrie Delaney. Good to see you.
Great to see you.
Senator Dave Marsden, good to see you again, sir.
Good to be back, Woody.
Second full week in this short session. How are things going from your perspective?
Well, getting the ERA through the state Senate was a good thing. The last time that was done, I think Democrats were in control, but this time Republicans were in control. So that's a crack in the door. We had a crack in the door on the minimum wage, although that was a somewhat cynical effort to somehow or another put people on the voting board in favor of $15 an hour minimum wage.
I think I heard that. Yeah.
Yeah, it was not done out of sincere desire to pass the minimum wage. But I don't think that kind of thing works. I think people recognize the fact that $7.25 an hour is ridiculous in this era. Pretty soon people will be working at McDonald's because they're guaranteed a Big Mac. The money will mean nothing. We've got to get minimum wage up. It's the one thing that's proven to work in rural areas. Increasing the EITC, the Earned Income Tax Credit, and putting money in the hands of people who will spend it in rural areas has worked. The minimum wage theoretically would work in the same way. You put money in the hand at the bottom of the system and it lifts everyone up. The trickle-down theory of economic development is pretty much a non-starter these days.
Well, good. What about on the House side? I know this is your second full session. Congratulations.
Thank you.
How are things going on the House side from your perspective?
I mean, things are moving really quick. This is my first short session. I think it ends up being about the same amount of work that we do in the long session, just in a compressed amount of time. So definitely keeping things very busy for us over here. But got bills on the move and very proud of the work that we've gotten done so far, and just looking forward to the next couple weeks before crossover, where we'll be able to, I hope, make some more headway.
Looks like ERA may not get a House vote this year. Died in committee the other day.
It doesn't look like it will. I know, obviously that's very upsetting to, a lot of the advocates who not only travel to Richmond, but who have been, really pushing this with phone calls and emails and social media. And I think they will continue to fight for this and push for this and hold out hope, until the end of the session. But at this point, it did not make it out of committee. So I think we're just going to have to regroup and decide what our next strategy is going to be.
Your constituents suffered any furloughs or anything like that as a result of the partial shutdown of the federal government?
Absolutely. Living in Northern Virginia, we have a very large federal workforce, and we're certainly hearing from our constituents who are very much suffering right now because of the shutdown. And there's a lot of fear, a lot of uncertainty. They don't know what's going to happen when they're going to work, many of them, and just not getting paid. And it's a very scary time for the people in our region.
And of course, Senator, I'm sure you have not only constituents who are employees, but a lot of contractors who will not get paid.
The contractors have actually been hit first because there won't be a bill for them that they get back pay when this is over. I've talked to a number of people who are in that circumstance. But tomorrow is a deadline. Tomorrow is the second paycheck that won't go out unless they figure out a way out of this today. Tomorrow there will be no paychecks for the second time in a row. And usually there are a lot of folks out there living close to paycheck, and this means missed mortgage payments, car payments, credit card payments. This is starting to put people in real peril. The President of the United States has started this. He said he owned it, and it is. He has made a small gesture of a compromise. I don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but he has to exercise leadership. He can open it. He's the one that closed it. He needs to get it done.
What about the impact on the local economy, retail establishments, for example?
Absolutely, and we're hearing those kind of stories that it's affecting the families directly, and as Senator Marsden noted, these are folks who are questioning how are they going to make their mortgage payments, how are they going to pay their credit card, what kind of fees are they accruing. It's hitting people personally very deeply. But that also means they're not spending money in the community, and so we're hearing stories of businesses that have seen a massive decline in customers, and so it definitely just falls throughout the entire economy. And I think Virginia, there's areas of Virginia that are particularly devastated by this, and Northern Virginia is absolutely one of those regions.
Impact on working families is something that you have in the hopper in terms of fossil fuels. Talk to us about that.
Well, we're with climate change being the crisis that it is. I mean, we have to take definitive and swift action to move away from fossil fuels and into green energy solutions. But the question that remains unanswered is, what about the workforce that's currently relying on those jobs that support the fossil fuel industry? If to save our planet, we need to actively take swift measure to move away from that type of energy collection to something different, we have to have a plan for the people who are supporting their families through those fossil fuel jobs and the industries that support that. And so I put forward a couple of pieces of legislation this year that address that. One would have been a green jobs tax credit, which would have given a tax credit to any employer who takes a fossil fuel worker out of a fossil fuel job, trains them, transitions them into a green energy job. And just to make a nice transition from one industry, which we know is ultimately going away, to a more sustainable energy sector. And then the other bill that I have is simply a study, because the green jobs tax credit would have addressed a slice of the pie. But there is also, much bigger questions about, the regions that rely on fossil fuel industry, different types of workforce that rely on that industry, and a lot of unknowns. What are the costs? What are the hurdles? What are the solutions? What would be a good proposal to really have a comprehensive plan for Virginia to transfer that workforce to other more sustainable jobs? And so that's another bill that, I'm waiting for a hearing on right now that will address how do we tackle that issue of our workforce to make sure that we're looking out for our working families as we also aggressively transition to clean energy.
And go ahead.
Yeah, the one parallel we have with that is the attempt in the coal fields to talk to people about transitioning. The problem is that a coal miner working full time earned about $75,000 a year, with overtime $100,000 a year. Don't think you're going to be able to make that kind of money, in some of the green job areas, or at least there's certainly that fear that I'm going to take a big step back here. Yes, I'll have a job, but it's not going to be the world that I'm used to and that I lived in. I think you may have the same problems in the fossil fuel area, is that the industry supports a tremendous number of high-paying jobs. We're not really sure yet, in the green energy world, what the pay is going to be for people, to do this kind of work, and it's a fear of the unknown for people, and that kind of transition is very, very difficult for folks to make.
And of course, the one thing we do know, our hope, is that the announcement about the Amazon headquarters in Northern Virginia are going to bring a lot of high-paying, high-tech jobs to Northern Virginia and trickle down, so to speak, to other areas of the state.
And I think that will be a very good thing. But it'll be over 10 years that these jobs will be created. And of course, affordable housing is a concern. But I think given the nature of where it's located, you'll have people living in Prince George's County, Maryland, Montgomery County, Maryland, the district. Certainly the southern suburbs of Stafford and excuse me, Prince William, people will come from from all over. These jobs will be great, but remember, we've had years where we've created 34,000 jobs in a year in Northern Virginia, and absorbed it. Absorbing Amazon over a 10-year period of time is not going to be quite as big a hurdle as people think. I'm just glad for the transportation improvements that will come with it.
Housing in Fairfax County, it's going to be a big issue. Housing prices skyrocketed just on the announcement. And of course, housing for low-income people is difficult right now in the county. So that's something the county is going to have to address as well.
Absolutely. I think the biggest issues that we need to make sure that we're staying in front of are transit, congestion, and affordable housing. I think we have an opportunity to see something that's going to positively impact our economy, but we need to make sure that we're reinvesting as much as we can in our community to ensure that we're really staying ahead of the game when it comes to traffic and transportation, and when it comes to affordable housing.
I know one of the other issues you've been involved in, even before you became a member of the House of Delegates, is sex trafficking, and I know you have some legislation dealing with that.
Yes, so I've been a child advocate all of my career. I've worked with children in foster care, I've been a sexual assault crisis counselor, and I've worked to fight sex trafficking both internationally and here in the United States. And so I have bills that touch on all three of those issues. And in the space of sex trafficking, one thing that's been brought to our attention is that human rights groups are looking at states' laws to determine where are the gaps. And one thing that we have yet to do in Virginia is to very clearly designate sex tourism as a crime in Virginia. This is a service of facilitation where people are profiting off of the trafficking of other individuals.
How does that work? I've never heard that term before.
And that's a big part of why I think legislation like this is really important, because we are learning a lot. In the past 10 years, we've learned a lot about what trafficking looks like here in the United States. 10 years ago, when I was traveling around the country talking about domestic trafficking, people didn't even know it existed. You asked someone about human trafficking, they thought that was happening in other countries, and it was something that people traveled away to go and participate in. And that's still definitely the case. But what we've learned a lot, especially in the last 10 years, is just how much trafficking is happening here in this country, and that it's U.S. children being trafficked on U.S. soil. And we need to catch up with some of our policies and our laws that really recognize what's actually happening, and that there are industries that are profiting off of the exploitation of these women and girls. And but some of our code just hasn't caught up to really capture what these crimes are, and I think it's time that we are aggressive with that.
Senator, I know you've been involved with children during your career, especially in the juvenile court system. Talk to us about what's going on in our court systems, and I'm particularly interested in a report that came out recently regarding foster care and some deficiencies noted there.
Foster care has always been a problematic way of dealing with children who need to be cared for out of their homes. Some kids do better in more institutional kind of care. Most do better in foster care, and certainly that's our preferred option to go to. But one of the things that's been brought up, one of the problems that exists with kinship care, we've done such a really great job in this country of advancing the idea that with the internet and what have you, to be able to reach out and find relatives for kids. But then we don't remunerate them for their care because they're family. And we need to really take a hard look at when we find family willing to take a youngster in, where a youngster is going to feel much more secure and confident in themselves, that somebody cares about them, who's related to them. It's a real anchor, for them, is that we need to be able to support this kinship care with financial incentives to take care of your relatives, because right now we're just paying people who are non-relatives to do it. Let's start, paying people who are family to do it.
Foster care. One of the things that has always concerned me, because I've done work with children through CASA, and when kids reach a certain age, they age out of the system, and there's very little support, if any, for them. How are we dealing with those issues?
I mean, those are incredibly important issues, and having worked with kids in foster care myself, it's something that I've seen terrible examples of children that are approaching 18, and the expectation is that they're going to take all their belongings, put it in a black trash bag, and walk out the front door. And I think we've come a long way over the years, but there's definitely room for improvement. And I think that recognizing that kids they still need a lot of support when they turn 18, and if we really want to ensure that our foster youth has the best opportunity for success in their adult life, it's going to come with a lot of support around those critical transition years where you're turning into an adult, but you still need a lot of support to continue your education and to get on sound footing. So I think there's certainly a lot of room for improvement.
Yeah, I passed legislation a few years back that allowed CASA to stay involved with kids up until the age of 21, and certainly social services can stay involved with kids who are going to college and what have you past the age of 18. But it is, life has become so complicated that it is, kids need guidance, up until well into their 20s. I mean, you used to be, you were ready to marry and move off and start your own farm at 15, but that was 200 years ago. This isn't the world we live in. Preparation for a successful life now takes a lot of help, takes a lot of time, takes a lot of resources, and we need to offer that to our foster kids. We, just even dealing with, getting foster kids driver's licenses with the insurance that goes with it, who's going to pay for it? But these are critical life passages that kids need to go through, and so these are the issues we tackle every year. We advance the ball, we move things forward. We have to remember that things cost money and we have to find the resources to pay for them. But we continue to make progress in the foster care issue.
And of course, our schools have become all things to all children and their families. They've taken up a huge burden over the last 50 years. I know part of the governor's budget deals with the question of not only teacher raises, but also support staff like nurses, psychologists, and counselors. Do you think we're doing enough?
I'm definitely happy to see the governor address those needs. I mean, obviously our teachers need to be paid such that we can retain the amazing talent that we have in our Virginia schools. So I'm very happy to see the raise proposed. But I absolutely agree that the support staff and a lot of the other professionals and paraprofessionals are doing amazing work for our kids, and our kids are absolutely relying on those experts and those professionals and that support to be successful. And I think it's incredibly important that we are supporting the people who are doing these most essential jobs and ensure that kids do have access to to more counselors and to more more opportunity for intervention when something goes wrong or when they need a little bit of help, that they've got someone at the school that's prepared to intervene and get things on the right path.
And of course, Senator, the kinds of conduct that I engaged in when I was in elementary school would probably put me in juvenile court these days.
It is, we used to have, I think, a much better system, and we're trying to get back to it now. We have learned in the juvenile justice realm that do whatever you can to keep kids out of incarceration, to keep them out of the juvenile justice system. We now have restorative justice programs going on in Fairfax. I have a budget amendment this year to do programs in Stanton and in Warrenton to make sure that police officers can actually divert kids before even going to juvenile intake, which is usually the diversion point. The police can take that action now and get a kid in with mediators to have them do a restorative justice solution to their problem and make amends to the victim. And the kid walks away feeling like I'm not a criminal. I'm made a mistake, and people handled it in a more formalized way than maybe our parents did many years ago, and that's the direction the system's going in. Because right now, when I left as director of the Department of Juvenile Justice in 2002, we had 1,150 kids in 8 facilities. In Virginia, we have now one facility and less than 300 kids. Oh, wow. We're using empty spaces in local juvenile detention homes for state-operated treatment programs, so those kids can stay close to home, school, counseling that they've had in their communities, pastors. All of those things have proven to be best practices and are working, and so we're better utilizing our juvenile resources in Virginia. And the last two administrations have just made tremendous progress in the juvenile justice world. But crime is down, probably more so than it's been at any other time in my lifetime. And this is the good news there. And so we're able to focus on not just finding new beds for delinquent kids, but actually utilizing the beds we have in different ways, and also keeping kids in, putting our resources toward diversion programs that keep them out of the system in the first place. That's what's helped drive the crime rate down.
So how much role do mental health issues play in our schools?
I think that we need to make sure that we've got, the school counselors and the professionals prepared to deal with both mental health issues, but I think the full spectrum of behavioral challenges that children might have. And there is some legislation that's been introduced this year by some of our colleagues that address the difference between a behavioral problem and a criminal problem. And I think especially when you're dealing with very young children. I mean, you've got kids that are in early elementary school. These are kids who, are still, their brain is still forming in the way that helps them self-regulate their impulses. So you see a lot of impulse control in young children, issues with impulse control. You see, ADHD, autism, other things that might cause certain kinds of behavior. And I think we need to be very clear that behavior issues are not criminal issues. And we need to be able to address behavior concerns and help children either have an IEP or a behavior plan in the school that's delivered by the proper professionals, and not criminalize children for acting out in a way that is not criminal.
And Senator, is it still a negative predictor if a child cannot read at the third grade level?
To my knowledge, that's always been an issue. Literacy. Once you fall behind, it is very, very difficult to catch up. The Finnish school system is considered just about the best in the world, and they don't teach reading until age 7. They're not trying to cram reading into 3- and 4-year-olds to get them to do things. So, there's a lot of science out there on reading, but it is still critical. That is what you need to survive in a digital world of the internet and the jobs that go with that. Being able to read and process information is very important. With that being said, it is still very important that we find career paths through our community colleges and our high schools and what have you for those who are who don't prosper in a verbal world, that they're more doing, hands-on kind of environment where they will thrive, needs to be fostered, and creating certificates and creating job opportunities for kids in the community college is something I think we're making some strides in, and I'm hopeful that we're starting to get education right. The one thing I will say that's looming for us, and it's something I've been involved with Senator Bill Stanley on, is the condition of our school buildings. They are deteriorating in rural and in urban areas at an alarming rate. We're better at building schools when the population demands it than we are at maintaining them. And the schools are aging, our roofs are in serious trouble, and we need to provide help to our struggling communities to make sure that kids are in first-rate buildings, because that sends a huge message as to what matters to us about education and the environments that it's conducted in.
I also want to get back to your area of expertise in sex abuse, because you have some legislation dealing with arbitration agreements.
Yes, and so we're looking forward to hearing that bill today. So this is we're going to be presenting a substitute. We've been working with stakeholders on this to really tackle a very sensitive issue. And so the bill that we're going to be hearing today deals with non-disclosure agreements and confidentiality agreements. Oftentimes when you start a new job, or your contractor's renewed, you're going to have a non-disclosure agreement or a confidentiality agreement. And what we want to make clear in our Virginia code is that those documents cannot be used to silence incidents of sexual assault. Far too often, those are tools that are used by sexual predators to silence their victims, and we need to make sure that that's not happening here in Virginia, and that we're very clear that those types of documents do not play that role here in Virginia.
And of course, you also have another piece of legislation dealing with the clergy.
Yes, so I have a bill up that will require that members of clergy are mandatory reporters of child abuse. This puts them in the same category as teachers, social workers, counselors, doctors, nurses, the full gamut of professionals whose jobs often put them in contact as a trusted leader in the community, where a child could feel that they could come to them and talk about an incident that's happening. And I think it's definitely timely and important that our members of clergy are held to that same moral authority as of other leaders in the community.
As usual, we need to talk about transportation a little bit. How are those tolls still doing on I-66 these days?
Well, the whole purpose of creating the tolls inside the Beltway, which was, I think, a necessary step in improving transportation through the corridor. We hear these nightmare stories about $40 tolls, and certainly they pop up once in a while, but what that is not you're being told $40. It's the toll is $40, get off this road and get onto a side road that will accomplish the same thing. It's a way of using tolling to direct traffic off of 66 onto Route 50 or 29 to 11, Route 7, the George Washington Parkway, and largely we're moving traffic better than we have. But I have an interesting bill this year on I-66, which is when you have a fender bender, when there's no shoulders because of the construction, the law will be, and there'll be signage to tell you, get to the next pull-off area to exchange information, don't stand there and block traffic. And that next pull-off area could include an exit ramp and an agreed-upon location. Go do it somewhere else. Don't slow down the East Coast because you've got a dent in your fender and want the person who hits you's information. So, at any rate, good bill, gotten through the committee.
Congratulations. Delegate Delaney, I know you wanted to spend a few moments at least talking about how you're addressing other issues in your district.
Well, I think, as you mentioned, it's my second session down in Richmond, and one thing that I've learned, in this first term is that we can really make a difference for the people who we represent. And sometimes it's not the really exciting messages that we can carry and champion, but sometimes it's just simple problems that people need help with, and to be able to put forward legislation that just solves those problems, I think it means an awful lot to your community when you're there to meet your constituents, listen to their needs, put forward legislation, and make a fix that helps make their life a little easier. I had an auto mechanic come to meet with me my monthly office hours, and he raised the issue that with modern computerized engines, you've got to get up to 55 miles an hour for, I think, 3 minutes to reset the catalytic converter. But if you're working on a car where the tags are expired, you're only allowed by current law to drive within a 5-mile radius of your shop. And of course, that was written before computerized engines. So now he's in a situation where he doesn't have a road within 5 miles of his shop where he can lawfully reach 55 miles an hour for 3 minutes. So he said, if we can do this in 10 miles, I can do my job and I can follow the law. And so that bill's up for vote today.
Great. Thank you both for being here. Dave Marsden, Carrie Delaney. Good to see you.
Good to see you,
Great
Woody.
to see you.
Thank you for watching Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Cox Communications. Until next time, I'm Woody Evans. Mm-hmm.